LEWIS Chesty Pulller was the most decorated Marine in U.S. history. Today we're talking about him. He served 37 years in the Marine Corps, going from a private all the way to a lieutenant general. His service ranged from World War I, Haiti, Nicaragua, World War II, and Korea. He received 5 Navy Crosses and 1 Distinguished Service Cross from the Army. Today we're going to learn why Chesty is the bestie of every Marine. Chesty Pulller was born in West Point, Virginia. He's actually distantly related to General Patton, another World War II hero that definitely deserves a video. His ancestry goes all the way back to the early colonial period in Virginia in 1621. He was born only a few decades after the Civil War, and so he knew a lot of Civil War veterans, which is kind of a crazy thing for us to think about World War II heroes knowing Civil War veterans, but it's true. And so he gained a lot of insight about war and grew his desire to become a warrior because of those stories from those men. From a very young age, because of that, he always wanted to be a soldier, a Marine, a warrior of some type. In fact, he actually tried to enlist in the Army when he was a minor in 1916 for the Border War, but his mom said no. The Army reportedly is still regretting that decision. When he did turn 18, he went to the Virginia Military Institute and began studying to become an officer. However, because of World War I, he decided to leave and join the Marines after being inspired by the 5th Marines in the Battle of Belleau Wood, which definitely deserves a video, so subscribe for that in the future. He enlisted as a private in the Marines. However, right before he would have gone over to Europe, the war ended and he did not actually see combat in World War I. But instead, he went to non-commissioned officer school and then over to officer training. He was commissioned as a 2nd lieutenant in the reserves. However, just 10 days later, he received an inactive status and got bumped down to corporal. However, after not too long, the United States went to help Haiti with their rebels and banditry. So he went over and became a lieutenant in the Haitian National Police Force. He served for over 5 years and saw over 40 engagements in that time. Now his enemy, the Kaku rebels, they were a vicious band using mostly machetes in their fighting. And during this time, he tried without success 2 times to gain his officer commission. His first engagement really showed what kind of Marine he would end up becoming, because he was charged with leading 25 men and lots of pack mules full of supplies to a base that they needed to get to. And as they came around the corner, they were surprised when 100 Kaku rebels, who were equally surprised, came around the bend and they were face to face with each other. Showing his default aggressive stance, Chesty demanded a cavalry charge and they assaulted the enemy. However, laying down with massive amounts of supplies and mostly mules, it didn't go anywhere. However, it terrified the rebels and they all ran away, even though they outnumbered them 4-1. As time progressed, he got more responsibility, having a force of over 100 soldiers underneath him that he trained, and they perfected the art of night ambush and jungle warfare, which would go on to help him much more later in life. These guerrillas, bandits, they would attack people in the daytime. So late at night, they would just be at their camp, and oftentimes they would be drinking and playing music. And so apparently it wasn't that hard to find them if you knew where to look. And so he would ambush them at night while they were in their camps. One specific ambush that he initiated was an L-shaped ambush. It is a common ambush for every military across the world. Now, in this L-shaped ambush, you start firing from the long side, and then that creates the soldiers who get scared and want to run the other direction. But here on the short side, you have machine guns that you just gun them all down. And so because of that, in this ambush, he took out 17 rebels and didn't lose a single man, even to injure. Eventually, with these techniques, his fellow Marines and the National Police Force of Haiti were able to defeat these rebels, and he was able to return home to the U.S. In 1924, he returned to the U.S. and recommissioned as a 2nd lieutenant only 5 years after losing that initial commission. It said the halls of Montezuma shook at the news that he was recommissioned as an officer. In 1928, him and some other Marines, they went down to Nicaragua to help the National Guard forces there to quell a rebellion. He led a detachment of Nicaraguan National Guardsmen, received his first Navy Cross for successfully engaging in 5 different engagements with superior numbers of enemy. Following a 1.5 years in country, he returned to the United States to go to a company officer training course. He returned to Nicaragua again and was instrumental in defeating the rebels there and bringing stability to Nicaragua, at which point he received his 2nd Navy Cross. William Lee, or William Iron Man Lee, as he was known, is mentioned in that citation. rebellion. But who was he? Well, he survived, and that was actually his third Navy Cross that he received. This is an incredible guy. He definitely deserves a video, so follow because he's coming along. In that battle, they thought he was dead. He got shot right in the head, but he woke up, grabbed a machine gun, and laid down suppressive fire, and they were able to defeat that much larger enemy force. Continued fighting in Nicaragua for several years and were able to quell that rebellion, and they fought in many different locations, from the jungles to the cities, as well aboard trains firing from each side, which is just kind of crazy. Chesty and his bestie Iron Man, no, not that Iron Man, they both got promoted and they went over to China to defend the American embassies, American interests, and American civilians who were living in China at the time. And he stayed there till 1936 when he returned to the United States and married his longtime sweetheart and pen pal Virginia in 1937, in which they had several children. One of those children would be Lewis Pullер Jr. Now in 1939, he returned to China and he stayed there until 1941, only a few months prior to Pearl Harbor. However, Iron Man would not be so lucky. He was actually captured by the Japanese in China following the attack on Pearl Harbor. Now Lee and his Marines were planning on having a last stand style Alamo, got a video about that, check it out, at the embassy. However, right before they were going to make their glorious stand, his superior officer told him that he needed to surrender, making him and his Marines some of the longest held POWs of World War II. That story is absolutely mind-blowing and tragic. However, he did survive the war. Which of course brings us to World War II. After Chesty left China, he was given command of the 1st Battalion, 7th Marines of the 1st Marine Division. He was then promoted to a lieutenant colonel, and he went over to Samoa prior to going to Guadalcanal. After a few weeks there, he then went over to Guadalcanal only a couple of weeks after the initial landings there. See the Battle of Guadalcanal in all of its terror and glory in the Pacific on HBO, which is a great series. While in Guadalcanal, Pullер led 1,000 Marines on many extremely dangerous missions. He was ambushed on the Montaku River, in which a much larger force of Japanese attacked their position, nearly routing them completely. However, because of his swift thinking, he was able to run to the beach and receive support from the USS Monson, a destroyer that was off the coast that was able to provide covering fire as the US Coast Guard went in and rescued the Marines using landing craft. Now, during this rescue, Coast Guard signalman Albert Monroe received the Medal of Honor after gallantly fighting off the enemy and dying in the process, the only U.S. Coast Guardsman to receive that honor. For Puller's swift thinking, he received the Bronze Star with Combat V for these actions. Later on in the Guadalcanal Campaign, he received his 3rd Navy Cross. That's right, his 3rd. For the Battle of Henderson Field, you can see this on the HBO series The Pacific as well. During this engagement, 1st Battalion, as well as the U.S. Army's 3rd Battalion of the 164th Regiment, defended Henderson Field, which was the main airfield on Guadalcanal, from over 4,000 Japanese troops, while only 2,000 Americans were there. Only 70 Americans were injured or died in that battle. Meanwhile, 1,400 Japanese soldiers died, and many more were wounded. You might notice that battle as the one where John Basilone received the Medal of Honor, which Chesty Pullер nominated him for. However, only a week after that battle, he received a serious injury that had to have him taken off the island and go to a hospital. However, only 10 days later, he returned to Guadalcanal because he needed to be with his men. Following the Battle of Guadalcanal, he went to Cape Gloucester in New Britain and led the 2nd beach invasion of the U.S. Marines during the Second World War. It was a month-long battle with serious fighting in the jungle, but he was prepared. They were able to capture 2 airfields and take over that portion of the island. He received his 4th Navy Cross for those actions, as he led the successful and expertly executed organized attacks on entrenched positions. He really showed that he was Chesty Pullер that people would someday come to know. Following this battle, he was promoted to a full bird colonel. Tragically, only a few weeks after this battle, his younger brother Sam, who was a colonel in the 4th Regiment of the Marine Corps, was killed by a sniper on Guam. According to the Marine Raiders website, he was a member of the Marine Raiders. If you know any more information about that, I'd love to find out. Comment down below, okay? Only a few weeks after this, Chesty Pullер went to the Battle of Peleliu, which is one of the bloodiest battles in Marine Corps history. He received his first of 2 Legions of Merit for this battle, which was such a severe battle. Once again, check out the Pacific, it's amazing. Chesty lost 2/3 of his Marines during this battle, which was so incredibly severe. Nearly 1,800 men. Now, he was working so hard and he would attack so ferociously that his commanding officers told him that he needed to slow down a little bit. Now, I do wonder if the reason why he was going so hard was because he had just lost his brother, or maybe this is just how he was. Following this battle, he returned to the United States and led Camp Lejeune. Soon enough, World War II would end and he would go off to Korea, where he would lead the invasion of Inchon, specifically in the Blue Beach sector. He received a Silver Star for his actions during this battle. His time in Korea was bloody and hard fought. He even received a Distinguished Service Cross from the U.S. Army. Soon after this, he went to the Battle of the Chosin Reservoir. Now, the Battle of the Chosin Reservoir is one of the best known battles during the Korean War, which is a largely forgotten war, which is really pretty sad. Definitely deserves a video just by itself, the Chosin Reservoir, as well as Korea as a whole. However, the Battle of Chosin Reservoir is known as the Frozen Chosin for the men who survived there, because it was so incredibly cold. They were fighting over a frozen lake. They used the bodies of the enemy as sandbags because they couldn't have anything else to protect themselves during that battle. Now, him and his men, they survived. They successfully returned back to safety after being led into a massive ambush during that battle. Now, during this battle, reportedly said, "We've been looking for the enemy for some time now. We finally found them. We're surrounded." That simplifies things. You can tell that by these actions, he just went for it full force. And he was able to successfully lead a breakout and was one of the Frozen Chosin. If you've ever met a veteran of the Chosin Reservoir, they have some crazy stories. Following this, he was promoted to a brigadier general, and he led the 1st Marine Division until he returned to the United States, where he then led the 3rd Marine Division, where he was promoted to a major general. Now, sadly, only a few years after the end of the Korean War in 1955, he would suffer a stroke. It's fairly severe, however, he still felt decent enough to continue serving. However, the Marines wanted to forcibly retire him, so they promoted him to a lieutenant general and got him out of there. Now, he led a fairly peaceful life until his son, Chesty Pullner Jr., joined the Marine Corps and became a lieutenant, going over to Vietnam, where during his first patrol, sadly, he stepped on a landmine, losing both of his legs and parts of both hands. Upon returning to the United States in a hospital, Chesty Pullner Jr. said that was the only time he ever saw his father cry over his broken body. Now, his son wrote an amazing Pulitzer Prize-winning book called Fortunate Son in 1992. Definitely recommend. However, tragically, his son took his own life in 1994. Chesty Pullner would live until 1971, where he would peacefully pass away. He was the most decorated Marine and well-known Marine in all of Marine Corps history, to the point where every night, all Marines across the globe wish him good night wherever he is. And he's even so popular among their Marines, they named the Marine mascot Chesty Pullerton after him, which is a bulldog.